This summer, our school district purchased some netbook carts for both of our buildings, and on them we have installed some open source software, particularly for word processing and spreadsheets, but also for some image editing and other applications as well. So I thought today would be a good time to talk a little bit about what open source is, what it means for your students as they use these computers, but also take that into a larger context and talk about what open source is with regards to education and learning. In the software world, open source is a term that's used to encapsulate a philosophy more than it is a single type of product. And that philosophy is that programming, or at least code, is free speech, as opposed to the proprietary market, which would be things like Adobe, Microsoft, and Apple. Open source people believe that code should be free and open for anybody. And so, therefore, this open source culture developed around independent programmers who had no interest in making a profit from selling their software, but collaborated to build their own software. And the most well-known of these is the operating system Linux, which we did not install on our netbooks, but it's worth knowing about. And what you see here on the screen is Tux, which is the mascot for Linux, and in many ways the mascot for open source software. And Linux is an operating system, much like Microsoft Windows or the Macintosh OS, and it has evolved to a point where it's almost as good, and some people will say it's even better, for some reasons, than either of the proprietary operating systems that are out there on the market. And there's lots of different versions of Linux, and right now the most common is Ubuntu. Many of you may already be using some open source software. In fact, I would guess that if you're using a computer, you probably are using a lot of open source software you might not even realize is open source. One example is Firefox. Firefox is a free to download and use web browser that for a long time has been one of the main competitors to Apple's Safari and Microsoft's Internet Explorer. What we have installed on our new computers here at school that many teachers have also had installed on their machines, at least in our elementary, is OpenOffice. And OpenOffice is an open source equivalent to an Office suite like Microsoft Office or AppleWorks. Another very common one is GIMP, which is an image editor, very powerful, very much like Adobe Photoshop. We've installed Tux Paint on our elementary school computers, which is a children's paint program. And another very common open source program we may install later on these is Scribus. And the purpose for that would be, if we don't have a Microsoft suite, we won't have Microsoft Publisher. And in case you wanted to use a program for page layout, Scribus would be the open source equivalent to that. There are some practical reasons why we would want to use open source software as opposed to a proprietary option. The most noticeable or most obvious is the cost. These programs are free to download and free to use, whereas if we went with a proprietary option, there would be a fee involved. Unfortunately, what you don't get is the support that you get from a vendor. So these have to be things that we support ourselves, either in-house or through resources online. There are some other reasons why that have been given for schools to use open source software that center around the values that went into the establishment of the movement, and the values that we think we'd like to instill in our students. Namely, that this whole suite of tools was created through collaborative effort, built for the common good. So it really, the creation of the software is then a public service to those who would like to use it, who can't afford to purchase a proprietary software. And so it can be argued that the reason to use open source software in schools is because it is based in the same philosophies that we want to impart to our students regarding information and community service. Now, the concept of open source does not apply strictly to software. It also applies to information. And probably the most well-known example of open source information is Wikipedia, which is the world's largest repository of encyclopedic type knowledge that's been created in an open fashion by its users. Other examples out there are wikibooks. These are books created by teachers and professors for their use in the classroom. This has become, in many ways, a liberation from the textbook publishing companies, and a way of giving more agency to instructors or to teachers. Curriki is another site that acts as a repository for open content to use in your schools, as is Flat Classroom Knowledge, OER Commons, and the Minnesota Commons, which are all movements to open source information, to democratize it and bring it, make information open to people. So this information is free to use, it's free to have and to distribute. Along parallel to this is also a new trend in open education, where schools like MIT, who kind of started this movement of open courseware, are starting to make a lot of their best content available to people free online. So you can go to MIT or MIT OpenCourseware and watch their best lectures from their lecturers there, and you can use that in your classroom, or you can learn independently from this. There's also been a slew of open universities that have popped up that don't necessarily issue a degree or diploma when you're done, but act as a place to go for free content. Wikiversity is one example of this. There's even an open high school that's recently opened out of, I believe, Oregon, that does the same thing for people wanting to learn about high school sort of things from home. And then you could even stretch this a little bit further and say that Web 2.0 tools like YouTube and Vimeo and Blip or blogs are a form of open source content or open source information. Even though a lot of those Web 2.0 providers are not strictly open source. For instance, YouTube is owned by Google, which is a company, and so the platform itself is not an open source platform. We can take this concept of open courseware, like what MIT put out, one step farther, and when extrapolated, we create this thing called open courses, which are actual courses that do run in regular time throughout a semester or a trimester or a year, that are offered by a school or university. But they're offered in multiple ways. You can either take it as a paying student, where you're enrolled in the university or school, or you could take it for free, almost like you're auditing the class. These courses tend to happen online and are mediated through different open source and Web 2.0 technologies. So with this, you could have a class at a school in, let's say, Canada somewhere, offer a class where they have maybe 12 students that are enrolled, officially, but they have 150 to 300 students who are participating in the class. That opens up the class to doing all kinds of activities that you would not be able to do with just 12 students. And currently there's about 250 to 300 of these courses that are currently being offered right now. Well, open source in all its forms still presents a lot of questions for schools. Particularly, is the cost savings of having the content or the software or the course be free? Is that worth is that cost savings worth the loss of the customer service that you get from a proprietary vendor? And then the question is it appropriate for us to be pushing these values? Or are those really our values that we want to have open and collaborative education? And should does that include using things that are open and collaborative in the classroom? I don't know. The other big question with this is if you're using public funds to fund public education, does that education then need to be open to the public? And so, unless you open source your courses or open source your content, are you really a public, offering a public service, or are you creating pockets of proprietary experiences with public funds? So the question is really broad and perhaps it's unanswerable. But this is what open source is. And we are using it on our machines to some degree.